1. Where we can find the location of genes. A. On the chromosome A. B. In the nucleus. C. In the cytoplasm. D. None of the above. Answer: A. On the chromosome A. It carries genetic information in the form of genes. 2. There are blank genes /are made up of chromosomes. A. 23. B. 46. C. 21. D. None of the above. Answer: B. 46. Because it is made up of 23 chromosomes from male parent added by 23 chromosomes from female parent. 3. Where we can find the location of chromosomes. A. In the prokaryotic cell. B. Mitochondria of a cell. C. Nucleus of a cell. D. None of the above. Answer: C. Nucleus of a cell. The chromosomes are located in the nucleus of the cell. Both plant cells and animal cells have chromosomes within their nucleus, and every chromosome is comprised of a single molecule of deoxyribonucleic acid and proteins. 4. How many chromosomes does fish normally have? A. 60. B. 48. C. 46. D. None of the above. Answer: B. 48. Most of the fish that are part of this group have the chromosome number 2n equals 48, that is believed to be the ancestral of teleosts. Their DNA content, C value, ranging between 0.52 and 0.65 pg, Cano et al., 1981, 1982. 5. Which sex chromosomes does a male has? A. 2 X chromosomes. B. 2 Y chromosomes. C. An X and a Y chromosomes. D. None of the above. Answer: C. X and Y chromosomes. Each human cell contains 23 pairs of chromosomes that carry DNA within their nucleus. The X and Y chromosomes, commonly referred to as the sex chromosomes, are one such pair. They determine the biological sex, reproductive organs, and sexual characteristics that develop in a person. Female, XX, mammals inherit one X chromosome from each parent, but males, XY, receive an X from their mother and a Y sex chromosome from their father. 6. Which of the following is in the order from smallest to biggest? A. Gene, chromosome, cell. B. Chromosome, gene, cell. C. Nucleus, gene, chromosome. D. None of the above. Answer: A. Gene, chromosome, cell. Genes are contained in chromosomes, which are in the cell nucleus. A chromosome contains hundreds to thousands of genes. 7. Blank can be affected by various factors like mutations that change the structure of the DNA sequences. A. Genotype. B. Phenotype. C. Traits. D. None of the above. Answer: C. Traits. The sequence of genes, i.e., structures of DNA, determine the sequence of amino acids in primary protein. The primary proteins finally form the enzymes. The enzymes are the biocatalyst and help the expression of traits in an organism by catalyzing the chemical process of that trait. The changed biocatalysts work in different ways and affect the expression of normal traits. 8. Nutrition, temperature, humidity, and stress are factors that influence. A. Genotype. B. Phenotype. C. Traits. D. None of the above. Answer: B. Phenotype. Environmental factors that may influence the phenotype include nutrition, temperature, humidity, and stress. Flamingos are a classic example of how the environment influences the phenotype. Whilst renowned for being vibrantly pink, their natural color is white. The pink color is caused by pigments in the organisms in their diet. 9. DNA stands for A. Deoxyribonucleic acid. B. Deoxyribonucleic acid. C. Deoxyribonucleic acid. D. None of the above. Answer: A. Deoxyribonucleic acid. Letter A has the correct spelling. 10. How many chromosomes does a mother passes to her child through her egg? A. 22. B. 23. C. 24. D. None of the above. Answer, B23. To form a fetus, an egg from the mother and sperm from the father come together. The egg and sperm each have one half of a set of chromosomes. The egg and sperm together give the baby the full set of chromosomes. So, half the baby's DNA comes from the mother and half comes from the father. 11. It is one of the major problems in aquaculture that produces wastes in the form of feces and unused feed and causes the depletion of oxygen in coastal environment. A. Pollution. B. Habitat destruction. C. Disease transmission. D. Forage or wild fish impact. Answer. A. Pollution may cause water quality to deteriorate and anoxic sediments to build up, and the emission of marine animal waste from aquaculture facilities into the ecosystem will not only affect other fish, but will also result in nutrient pollution. 12. Habitat destruction and disease transfer are the negative environmental effect in aquaculture. A. True. B. False. Answer. A. Habitat destruction and disease transfer are the main reason why fish are affected in this problem. 13. This is one of the most frequently talked about of open water aquaculture. A. Transmission of disease. B. Antibiotics. C. Energy usage in feed production. D. Nutrient buildup. Answer. D. Because there are nothing to prevent dead fish, the feed that did not eat and the feces entering the water column from the cage. 14. The completion between municipal and the commercial sectors is due to the finite nature of marine resources combined with an open access principle. A. Destructive fishing. B. Resource depletion in the coastal areas and inland waters. C. Overfishing. D. Siltation/pollution. Answer. C. Fisher folk are forced to employ more efficient fishing technology, increasing finer meshed nets and other destructive fishing method to meet their short-term needs. 15. Environmental degradation from aquaculture practices has been reported, and the negative effects of this are pollution and eutrophication. A. True. B. False. Answer. A. This problem together with chemical pollution can cause algal bloom, depletion of oxygen, reduction in water quality and habitat destruction. 16. It occurs when humans allow only those organisms with desired characteristics to produce to the next generation. A. Breeding. B. Selective breeding. C. Crossbreeding. D. Pure bearding. Answer. B. Selective breeding involves choosing parents with particular characteristics to breed together and produce offspring with more desirable characteristics. 17. It concerns with individual mating and their progeny and deals with the inheritance of traits kind, form, color, structure, etc. A. Genetics. B. Cytogenetics. C. Qualitative genetics. D. Quantitative genetics. Answer. C. It is a measurable phenotype that depends on the cumulative actions of many genes and the environment. These traits can vary among individuals, over a range, to produce a continuous distribution of phenotypes. 18. It deals with the genetics of continuously varying characters rather than considering changes in the frequencies of specific alleles of genotypes. A. Genetics. B. Cytogenetics. C. Qualitative genetics. D. Quantitative genetics. Answer. D. Each quantitative trait is governed by many non-allelic genes or polygenes. The environmental conditions affect the phenotypic expression of polygenes variously. 19. Is a specific characteristic of an individual and can be determined by genes, environmental factors, or by a combination of both. This can be qualitative, such as eye color, or quantitative, blood pressure. A. Trait. B. Quality. C. Monogenic. D. Polygenic. Answer. A. In biology, a trait is a characteristic determined by your genetic makeup. Hair color, eye color, size, blood type, and hairline are all examples of biological traits in people. 20. A sequence of DNA with a known physical location on a chromosome that are close to each other tend to be inherited together. A. Cytogenetic. B. Genetic marker. C. Genetic sequencing. D. Genetics. Answer. B. A genetic marker is a gene or DNA sequence with a known location on a chromosome that can be used to identify individuals or species. It can be described as a variation, which may arise due to mutation or alteration in the genomic loci, that CA observed. 21. The production of plants and animals especially for the purpose of developing new breed or types. A. Genetics and breeding. B. Genetics. C. Breeding. D. Cytogenetic. Answer. C. Breeding is sexual reproduction that produces offspring, usually animals or plants. It can only occur between a male and a female animal or plant. 22. There are ways of progeny testing in fish culture, except A. Testing of pairs without testing males and females separately. B. Test spawners belonging to one sex. C. Complete diallele crossing is the testing of both females and males. D. None of the above. Answer. D. All three methods have been applied in practice. 23. This is the same alleles for trait. A. Homozygous. B. Heterozygous. C. Phenotype. D. Genotype. Answer. A. If the paired alleles are the same, the organism's genotype is said to be homozygous for that trait. 24. This refer to different alleles for trait. A. Homozygous. B. Heterozygous. C. Phenotype. D. Genotype. Answer. B. Each parent provides a different allele of a given gene, and the offspring is referred to as heterozygous, hetero meaning different, for that allele. 25. The ratio of different genotype in the offspring from a genetic cross. A. Multiple alleles. B. Genotypic ratios. C. Monohybrid cross. D. Phenotypic ratios. Answer. B. The genotypic ratio is the ratio depicting the different genotypes of the offspring from a test cross. It represents the pattern of offspring distribution according to genotype, which is the genetic constitution determining the phenotype of an organism. 26. The first generation of offspring from P generation. A. P generation. B. F1 generation. C. F2 generation. D. F3 generation. Answer. B. The offspring of the P1 generation are the F1 generation, first filial. 27. Added to the feeds to enhance immune response, increase digestion, nutrient availability, and increase stress resistance. A. Multivitamins. B. Antioxidants. C. Feed additives. D. All of the above. Answer. C. Prebiotics, such as acidifiers, essential oils, probiotics, and antibiotics are all feed additives that optimize the gut flora of fish and shrimp, enhance the immune response, increase stress resistance, promote animal and gut health, and increase digestion and nutrient availability. Anuta et al., 2011. 28. Used to determine how well consumed feeds are converted to fish flesh. A. Frequency conversion ratio. B. Feed conversion ratio. C. Protein efficiency ratio. D. Both B and C. Answer. B. Feed conversion ratio, FCR, is the conventional measure of livestock production efficiency. 29. This is the least expensive source of energy in fish feeds. A. Ash. B. Protein. C. Carbohydrates. D. Fats. Answer. C. Carbohydrates, starches and sugars, are the least expensive sources of energy for fish diets. Although not essential, carbohydrates are included in aquaculture diets to reduce feed costs and for their binding activity during feed manufacturing. Dietary starches are useful in the extrusion manufacture of floating feeds. 30. Expensive source of energy in fish feeds. A. Protein. B. Carbohydrates. C. Ash. D. Fats. Answer. A. Protein is often the most expensive source of energy in manufactured diets and should be kept to a minimum, consistent with good growth and feed conversion. Protein has a Mi value of about 4.5 kcal/g for fish, which is higher than that for mammals and birds. 31. Eating food by simply filtering food from the water. A. Plant feeding. B. Carnivorous feeding. C. Filter feeding. D. Plankton feeding. Answer. C. Filter feeding is a method of aquatic feeding in which the animal takes in many small pieces of prey at one time. As opposed to predators who seek out specialized food items, filter feeding is simply opening up your mouth and taking in whatever happens to be there, while filtering out the undesirable parts. Filter feeders are mostly underwater creatures, although ducks and flamingos get in on the action as well. 32. Blank refers to the farming of fish, crustaceans, mollusks, aquatic plants, and other aquatic organisms. A. Aquaculture. B. Mariculture. C. Fish culture. D. Aquatic culture. Answer. A. Aquaculture is the farming of aquatic organisms, including fish, mollusks, crustaceans, and aquatic plants. Farming implies some form of intervention in the rearing process to enhance production, such as regular stocking, feeding, protection from predators, etc. 33. This refers to the amount of nutrients absorbed by the fish. A. Digestibility. B. Palatability. C. Consumability. D. None of the above. Answer. A. Digestibility refers to the amount of nutrient absorbed by the individual and is generally calculated as the amount of nutrient consumed minus the amount of nutrient retained in the feces. 34. Which does not belong? A. Streptococcus. B. Vibriosis. C. Pseudomonas. D. Flavobacteriosis. Answer. A. Streptococcus is wrong since the correct is Streptococcus. 35. Salt bath treatment is applicable only to the following except A. White spot disease, ichthyopthyreus. B. Skin lesions. C. Endoparasites. D. A and C. Answer. D. White spot disease, itch, cannot be treated with salt bath since they are present underneath the epithelial cells and not directly exposed to the water. Same also with the endoparasites wherein they do not have exposure to the water, indicating that salt bath treatment will be useless. 36. Which is causing viral diseases in tilapia? A. Tilapia lake virus. B. Tilapia river virus. C. Tilapia common virus. D. None of the above. Answer. A. The tilapia lake virus, which is currently an emerging viral diseases in tilapia industry. 37. Blank is the application of genetics principles and methods for increasing aquaculture productivity by genetically modifying the fish stocks and for the management of fish populations to obtain maximum sustainable yield without affecting the genetic diversity. A. Genetics. B. Genetics and breeding. C. Fishery genetics. D. None of the above. Answer. D. Fisheries genetics includes specimen identification and barcoding, assessment of stock structure and admixture, monitoring of stocking and restocking programs, analysis of genetic diversity and variation, and assisting conservation management program of wild fisheries resources. 38. This are chemical elements or substance required in trace or small amounts for the normal growth and development of living organisms. A. Micronutrients. B. Vitamins. C. Minerals. D. Nutrients. Answer. A. Micronutrients, often referred to as vitamins and minerals, are vital to healthy development, disease prevention, and well-being. 39. Food size should match with the mouth size of the fish for proper feeding management. A. True. B. False. Answer. A. The size of the food you feed should match the size of your fish's mouths. In other words, large predatory fish will usually show no interest in small flake crumbles, and small fish can't fit large pellets into their mouths. 40. Main source of animal-based protein in feeds. A. Vitamins and minerals. B. Soybean meal. C. Fish meal. D. Rice bran. Answer. B. Soybean remains the most important and preferred source of high-quality vegetable protein for animal feed manufacture. Soybean meal, which is the byproduct of oil extraction, has a high crude protein content of 44 to 50% and a balanced amino acid composition, complementary to maize meal for feed formulation. 41. Eating food by simply filtering food from the water. A. Carnivorous feeding. B. Plankton feeding. C. Filter feeding. D. Plant feeding. Answer. C. Filter feeding, a form of food procurement in which food particles or small organisms are randomly strained from water. 42. This is the least expensive source of energy in fish feeds. A. Fats. B. Ash. C. Carbohydrates. D. Protein. Answer. C. Carbohydrates, starches and sugars, are the least expensive sources of energy for fish diets. Although not essential, carbohydrates are included in aquaculture diets to reduce feed costs and for their binding activity during feed manufacturing. 43. Expensive source of energy in fish feeds. A. Fats. B. Carbohydrates. C. Protein. D. Ash. Answer. C. Protein is often the most expensive source of energy in manufactured diets and should be kept to a minimum, consistent with good growth and feed conversion. 44. It is an infection caused by an umicete fungi known as Aphanomyces invadens or A. piscicida. A. Epizootic ulcerative syndrome or EUS. B. Red spot disease. C. Mycotic granulomatosis. D. All of the above. Answer. D. Epizootic ulcerative syndrome, EUS, is considered to be an infection with the umicete known as Aphanomyces invadens or A. piscicida and characterized histologically by penetrating hyphae surrounded by granulomatous inflammation. EUS is also known by other names such as red spot disease, RSD, mycotic granulomatosis, MG, ulcerative mycosis, UM, and in 2005 it was suggested to rename EUS as epizootic granulomatous aphanomycosis, EGA, Baldic ETAL, 2005. 45. Blank are nutrients groups that an organism metabolizes to produce the energy it needs for numerous physiological processes and physical activities, example proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. A. Energy-yielding nutrients. B. Macronutrients. C. Micronutrients. D. Nutrients. Answer. A. Energy-yielding nutrients are the parts of food that the body actually uses to make energy. Carbohydrates, fats, and proteins are also referred to as energy-yielding macronutrients because they supply the body with energy. 46. Blank is the chemical reactions inside the living cells that change food into energy. Our bodies need this energy for locomotion, development, and to sustain daily function and bodily processes. A. Nutrients. B. Energy. C. Metabolism. D. Vitamins. Answer. B. This is the chemical reactions in the body's cells that change food into energy. Our bodies need this energy to do everything from moving to thinking to growing. Specific proteins in the body control the chemical reactions of metabolism. 47. Phylogenetics is important. A. True. B. False. Answer. A. Phylogenetics is important because it enriches our understanding of how genes, genomes, species, and molecular sequences more generally evolve. 48. Punnett square is the worldwide standard for calculating the protein content in a wide variety of materials ranging from human and animal food, fertilizer, wastewater, and fossil fuels. A. True. B. False. Answer. B. Punnett squares are a useful tool for predicting what the offspring will look like when mating plants or animals. 49. Allele frequency refers to how common an allele is in a population. It is determined by counting how many times the allele appears in the population, then dividing by the total number of copies of the gene. A. True. B. False. Answer. A. An allele frequency is calculated by dividing the number of times the allele of interest is observed in a population by the total number of copies of all the alleles at that particular genetic locus in the population. Allele frequencies can be represented as a decimal, a percentage, or a fraction. 50. It is a mathematical equation that can be used to calculate the genetic variation of a population at equilibrium. A. Punnett square. B. Kagel-Dall method. C. Hardy-Weinberg equation. D. None of the above. Answer. D. The equation is an expression of the principle known as Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, which states that the amount of genetic variation in a population will remain constant from one generation to the next in the absence of disturbing factors.